And so it's not as though the cults are only guilty of having within Logos constructions of God that the atheists go after. It's not that they're the only ones that are guilty of it. It's a common view. Richard Dawkins also wrote in his book, The God Delusion, that who created God? That's the question that he brought up, and you hear that question all the time. He asked that question in a debate against John Lennox, and John Lennox said, well, that's almost like an oxymoron, because the Christians, of course, the Christians don't believe in any created gods. One of the points of definition of what we believe our God is that he's uncreated and not changing, and that he exists in eternity, and he's timeless, he's spaceless, he's immaterial.
I think that's one of the issues, or the major issues of Logos-focused frameworks, and by that what I mean is frameworks that require the understanding within representation in order to be framed in any conceivable manner, and essentially the idea that there is no such thing as a God or a being that goes all the way backwards, not just to the beginning of time, but before the beginning of time, because according to the atheistic framework, there's no such thing as a beginning of time. There is just an endless spanning of infinity in both directions, and that is only held by a unconscious materialism. And that to me is I guess the natural conclusion of saying, like you said before, when they say, well, nothing's provable, or it's not, if it's not a provable claim or a verifiable claim, it therefore has to be invalid. But that is just a baseless view on its head. Like, I remember having a disagreement with a person years ago who said, well, you can't disprove God any more than you can disprove that we live in a matrix, or you can disprove that we're actually all just figments of people's imagination, or and that whole, like, I believe therefore I am, or I think therefore I am, but that's the only thing I can understand, that I know that I am, but I don't know that anything else is, or that there's any objective truth to anything. And to me, that's the natural conclusion of the abandonment of God and the abandonment of a theological framework, is that you have to have something tangible eventually. There has to be tangibility. Otherwise, it is just a endless cycle of unprovable baseline foundations.
Yeah, that's right. There are, philosophical ways to construct things that are knowable, that are not possible to study in a lab. Think, for example, one of the things that are used to verify a physics theory, and when I say verify, well, that it even gives it validity that it can possibly be a physical theory when it's put forth in a paper, is that it's mathematically sound. Now, what does that mean, right? What does it mean that it's mathematically sound? This would be one way of verifying it without actually verifying the possibility of the claim, without actually testing to see that, we may not have the technological capability to be able to test the claim and verify it right now. That may be something that we can do in the future, but for now, it does solve the math problem, this proposal, so it's valid as a theory. Now, what is that based on? That's just based on the math checking out, right? So we won't know the truth of the matter until we can experiment, but for now, this is something that we have that's good to go on. Now, I'm not suggesting that God's just in the category of this is something that good that we have to go on. What I'm saying is we can know things, or we can know certain things about certain things. We can at least know whether or not the theory is testable based on other things that are not the test itself, right? That's sort of the point that I'm getting at. So, for example, with God, we would want to make sure that he wasn't violating the law of non-contradiction. What does that mean? Well, it's basically a tool. The law of non-contradiction is a tool that we use to think anything, and the law of non-contradiction has to be true in order for us to think anything. There's a famous quote by Ibn Sina, Muslim philosopher from about 1000 AD. And he said, anyone who doesn't believe in the law of non-contradiction should be beaten and burned until he believes that not being beaten is not the same as being beaten, and that being burned is not the same as not being burned. So yeah, just
and that's the whole idea of people who say there's no such thing as objective truth, and the natural response to that is, okay, so you saying it's objectively true that there is no such thing as objective truth. To make a claim that there is no such thing as objective truth is to make an objective truth claim that there is no such thing as objective truth. Like it's a self-cycling and a self-refuting point. And that's like you're kind of saying there, is that eventually it has to get to a point where you say one thing is better than another, or is there is such a thing as good or bad or better or worse. Otherwise, you just live in a void of nothingness where everything just is. Everything that happens always was going to happen, and it was never not going to happen, and it's not good or bad. It's just circumstance, and it's just energy all moving in a cosmic cycle. That to me is I know a lot of atheists probably wouldn't even get down to that degree of thinking to that level, and the ones that do probably get so overburdened by the idea that there's no other alternative, especially ex-cult ones. They think the alternative is a cult mindset. And that to me is the danger of the cults, is that they cause people to become so emotionally and theologically warped inside these frameworks, these theologies of the cult, that they think that is spirituality. They think that is the belief in God, is a cult mindset. So then, of course, the alternative of atheism is a more natural, more understandable concept, because at least this logos-centric framework, it doesn't end up at an old man in the sky. Because they think that God is just an old man in the sky. There is no such thing as a transcendent God that lives outside of of reality and in infinity and outside of time and space. They just think that everything is within that time and space, and it has to be reasonable if it's within time and space. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to check out the full live stream recording. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. The more support that we get, the more that we can support others who are ex or current cult members to work through their indoctrination and hopefully to approach faith honestly. As always, in the meantime, God bless. I'll see you in the next one.